There is a lot of attention on Tren de Aragua, busting the criminals, the hardcore criminals on the street.
Sure.
Lots of attention on that. Not so much on this. What is ICE doing related to companies here in Utah who are clients of yours?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. The reality is the ICE has always had multiple responsibilities. And what we've seen over the past 5 to 7 years has been a steady increase in what are called site inspections, which is where ICE sends a notice either in person or sometimes through the mail, but usually in person, in what is perceived as a very scary experience, where someone usually wearing an ICE jacket or a bulletproof vest, usually armed, shows up to deliver some kind of a notice that, dear company, we're going to be looking through all of your employment files for a certain period of time. And they give you a 1-page list of all the stuff they want you to make sure you have in the next 3 days when they show up for that. And most companies frantically start Googling, wondering what they're supposed to be doing to even follow this request. And a lot of them end up calling me to find out what's next for them.
How much time does ICE give you in advance of an inspection?
Legally, they're only required 72 hours, so 3 days. They might give you 5 days or a week before that, but that's all they usually give.
So an ICE agent, armed, presents this letter.
Correct.
Company's got to get together basically income tax information, right? Payroll, personnel,
Yep.
All that stuff.
Yep, I-9 forms, all of the onboarding documents for employees from usually years prior, which may or may not all be on site, just depending on how big the company is.
And companies freak out about this.
I would. I mean, unless you've had that experience before, you don't really know what to expect, and it's not the normal business experience for every company.
And is it random? How are they selected for this?
That's anybody's guess. I've never been able to get a straight answer. There's definitely an added volume or frequency that occurs in certain industries. The construction industries are hit very hard by this. Hospitality is hit very hard. Restaurants are hit very hard. And legally, any company is subject to this. But in my experience and talking to other colleagues, there's definitely a certain kind of industry that has more experience.
Medical and tech?
To an extent, but far fewer.
Okay, does happen.
It can happen, yeah.
Okay, and so then the ICE comes back, and who do they come back with?
Well, they can bring multiple agents if they want to go through and physically retrieve all of these documents that they told you to prepare. If the company has an attorney, maybe that attorney knows to reach out to ICE on your behalf and coordinate this delivery so it's less scary. One of those two options, though.
So, and they go and they retrieve this information. You're supposed to have it prepared for that.
Correct.
At that point. So they don't have to go searching for it. It's not a raid, per se.
It doesn't start that way. I suppose I have had some clients tell me that they have had that experience before learning that an attorney could even have helped them. But it can get to that point if somebody's ignoring or maybe not receiving those notices.
So it becomes a raid in some cases, a search for documents.
Right.
On the premises. Does ICE have to have a warrant for this?
Nope. They show up with that notice. Here's our obligation under federal law, and it cites the law, Section 274. We're here to get your stuff.
And there's no grieving this or appealing an inspection?
Sure, you can, but you'll end up in an immigration court or in a U.S. federal court, depending on if you want to go down that road. And you're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees fighting this, which ultimately is going to come back to the same conclusion of they're entitled to do this under certain federal rules. And if you want to fight them on that, you're going to lose, and then give them their stuff.
So ICE takes the documents, and then typically what happens?
They'll review it. They'll look at whether they feel all of the documents are complete, if you've given them everything they've asked for. If they don't, they'll send some kind of a supplemental request, probably not in the same in-person scary experience. That'll be more through mail or through an attorney asking for supplemental documents. And once they're satisfied they have everything that they asked for, they'll review it and determine what your liability may or may not be.
And they'll make that determination within days, weeks?
It's usually weeks to months. It's a stressful process where a company's sitting there wondering what happens. Frankly, it can destroy a company. Just getting the notice can destroy a company.
How so?
When an employees talk. Employees will talk about what happened on a certain day, and when they get off shift, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, a guy in a gun and an ice vest showed up at the work today and took, a box full of documents." And whether the company has done anything right or wrong doesn't really matter to the morale of the employees. And whether the employees are worried about their own immigration status or they're just simply worried about being associated with a company that's under some kind of federal investigation, at least that's their opinion. These employees, that's their experience. It's not uncommon that a large group of employees will quit. They'll just walk off the job.
That's happened.
Yeah.
To your clients.
To my clients.
So we have one client here in documents that you provided, $180,540 fine. What was that fine for?
Well, allegedly, what had happened was the individual, the company, had employed people without proper authorization. And so essentially their I-9 documents had not been completed correctly. And I-9s are things everybody fills out as part of an onboarding process. Most companies fill them out and forget. They're probably filled out wrong half of the time. And there's about 20 boxes on this form. And what the immigration will do is they'll go through and they'll look at, did you fill these things out properly? Did you use documentation properly to support it? And if not, each of the errors becomes a penalty. And then they tabulate the penalty, and there's a scale. And then that penalty can add up until their math figures whatever number they throw at us.
So these fines can be for clerical errors.
Most of them are.
Does it mean that those companies are hiring illegal aliens or undocumented persons?
No, not at all. I know that some people try to extrapolate one and the other, but I had another hotel group that had a smaller fine. It was only, and I say only, it's still a big number. It was about $15,000. That everybody was U.S. citizens in this raid. There wasn't a doubt. Everybody had passports. Everybody was citizens, but it was all clerical. And the
I-9s were
they had just filled them out. They did their best, right? But companies don't have $1 million for compliance budgets. They do the best with what they have sometimes.
So they filled out the I-9s. They were all legally able to work, but the company still got fined.
Yep.
How often do companies call you and say, I got an inspection notice, what do I do now?
Unfortunately, it's been increasing, and increasing over a number of years. I'd say 5 to 7 years. I'm always frustrated when we get too excited about current presidents, because what people don't realize sometimes is that immigration has policies and has regulations that are followed. And so what we're seeing today is oftentimes the policy effect of years before. And in my opinion, my experience, President Obama, President Trump the first time, President Biden, President Trump today, all of these have an impact on this. This isn't just something that happened today.
Kind of continued the same course.
Right. This isn't something that changes overnight. This is policy and procedure, and it goes down from federal executives down to local regional offices where individuals are still trying to get promotions. And in the government, unfortunately, sometimes one of the incentives for promotions is not sales, because they don't do sales, but it might be fines, it might be convictions, it might be raids, it might be any number of those things that we see. That's how they measure performance.
So in some cases, we don't want to say every company is getting picked on here, right? Because in some cases, they do share some blame, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, partly the blame is to do with them not knowing what the rules are.
Yeah.
Partly is them knowing what the rules are. And the scale that's used to calculate does contemplate this, where you have a higher penalty if there's some idea or pattern of prior behavior that has been corrected. But even a small company that had no idea they were doing something wrong, gets corrected, and it's a $30,000 bill. And they're forced to grapple with that.
So it used to be, how many times a year in the old days would you face this situation?
Maybe once or twice a year.
Okay, and now it
feels almost monthly. It's, I've often taught at HR professional training meetings, and this is a very requested topic for me to discuss, is how to deal with I-9 and ICE audits. If the HR professionals are asking the attorney to come and talk about it, a lot of people are seeing this more.
Okay. Who's easier to deal with from your experience, IRS or ICE?
They are equally fun. No. The IRS tends to leave their guns at home, although every once in a while they like to dust them off and show up at a business. The ICE, unfortunately, there's a certain culture. They're all ICE agents. They're all armed. They're all trained, and so that sometimes tends to be difficult because they don't follow the same legal expectations as officers. Sometimes when you're dealing with an ICE entity, ultimately they're going to, if you have an attorney, they're going to refer you over to their office of chief counsel at one of their regional offices. But all of the prior work's done by officers on the ground who don't like to talk to lawyers, don't want to talk to anybody except the business, and it makes the process a little bit more frustrating and scary than it needs to be.
So you've used that term, frustrating and scary. So for the clients, your clients, does that describe most of them, all of them?
Well, any of them who've had this experience are nervous about it. It gives them stress. It keeps them up at night. They think they're going to jail at some point. That realistically isn't going to happen, but that's their perception. That's their state of mind.
Because of the way they interact with ICE, or because of... No,
they're just not familiar with law enforcement in general, because these aren't people that are hiding terrorists. They're not hiring gangbangers. They are hiring professional people, skilled trades individuals, people that help build our communities. And yet now they feel like they're being criminalized as a blanket policy. And so they're not used to the law enforcement process, and so it's very scary.
You're not against enforcing immigration laws.
Absolutely not. I think it'd be great to enforce it. I just think that there are some things, especially as it relates to business, that have not been updated in 30 years.
So what needs to happen? What's the fix, if you will?
Well, we've done a lot better on the emotional sides of immigration. Still not great, but better, where we're helping families and we're helping individuals pursue some of those more emotional aspects of immigration. But right now we have a program that a lot of construction companies rely on called an H-2B program. And in that program, the entire country gets 66,000 visas per year to hire temporary work. Well, first of all, 66,000 jobs for an entire country is insane. That's a drop in the bucket.
Nothing.
It doesn't do anything. We could probably absorb that in just Utah and still need more. Yeah. The second part is these companies don't need temporary seasonal workers. They need full-time permanent workers so that we as consumers can rely on them to help us build our communities, our homes, our businesses. Even if that program were to be increased, and now we come back and say, okay, you can only have workers for 6 months of the year. What kind of business can build around that? There are really some limitations for the blue collar employment industries out there. We have some good ones on the college educated, employment pool. We don't do a great job when it comes to the companies that we rely on in our communities.
So let more people work on a temporary basis? Is that part of it? So H-2B would be, you would expand that? I would
expand it. I would make it just like what's called the H-1B. This is a permanent work employment thing for 3 to 6 years, not 6 months at a time and go back home and then try again, and maybe you can get another 6 months and then go back home. That's difficult for an employee.
Because these guys are not criminals, right? That's what you're saying. These
they've
guys,
all,
they're workers.
They've all had to go through background checks to get the visas. They've all had to prove they don't have criminal histories. They all have to not violate laws in the U.S. Frankly, a lot of them are better than a lot of U.S. citizens because they're on their best behavior at all times.
Okay. Randy, do you have anything?
People would say that this is the intended effect is to put a chill to prevent these businesses from hiring undocumented. Is this true?
I think that there's a policy argument that these enforcement actions is to deter or attempt to deter hiring undocumented individuals. The problem is that the effect of the penalty doesn't require that they prove that they knowingly hired undocumented aliens. If you show up to a company and you provide to me documents that look on their face to satisfy employment authorization rules, but ultimately they turn out later not to have been accurate or to have been fraudulent or to not match up with the IRS, notification process in the background, why is that the company's fault? I feel like the government, if they want to use this as a deterrent, they need to have an obligation to prove that the company knowingly did something wrong.
And that's not happening.
It's not happening. It's such a low threshold. And showing these clerical errors, making them penalties, candidly, it makes companies worried about hiring anybody that doesn't look white. I'm not trying to say that's their intent, but that's an effect. Because if you're going to make me responsible for documents that look good on their face but ultimately turn out wrong, and my team didn't maybe fill out a form the right way, and now I'm going to go out of business because I have a $200,000 bill, that's going to make me not want to hire anybody that doesn't 100% look like my neighbor next door. And I don't think that's good policy.
Okay.